The room was softly lit, filled with the low hum of quiet conversations. People moved around in small groups, sipping drinks, laughing gently, and sharing stories from their lives. In one corner, a young woman sat alone, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes quietly observing the room. She kept to herself, blending into the background, almost invisible to those who didn't take the time to notice. She had always been like this, preferring to watch rather than join in, listening rather than speaking. She had arrived early, hoping to avoid the crowd, hoping that perhaps she could sit quietly without being noticed. Her heart beat faster as more people entered, each greeting one another with smiles and hugs. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Tonight was different from her usual quiet evenings at home. There was a piano in the corner of the room, its polished wood gleaming under the lights, and it seemed to call to her in a way nothing else could. The woman had always loved music. From a very young age, the piano had been her closest companion, the place where she could express feelings that words could never capture. She had practiced in secret for years, filling her small room with melodies and emotions, letting her fingers dance over the keys. Music had been her escape, her comfort, and the only place where she felt completely herself. But she had never performed in front of anyone, not even once. The thought of it now made her stomach twist with nerves. Around her, guests chatted and laughed, their conversations a gentle background noise. A few people glanced toward the piano and then back to their friends, not paying it much attention. She wondered if anyone would notice her if she simply stayed seated, invisible and silent. But at the same time, a small, daring part of her longed to let someone hear her play, to share a piece of herself that no one had ever experienced. She thought about leaving, about quietly slipping out and avoiding the attention entirely. Her steps would have been light, her presence unnoticed, and she could have returned to the comfort of her quiet world. Yet, a tiny voice inside urged her to stay, to trust herself, to allow the music to speak even if her voice could not. She took a deep breath, feeling her hands clammy in her lap, and tried to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. Nearby, a few guests started moving closer to the piano, casually trying out a few notes, laughing when they made mistakes. She watched, her curiosity growing. She had always played with care, each note deliberate, each chord carrying intention. The piano was not just an instrument to her. It was a friend, a storyteller, a mirror of her soul. Seeing others handle it carelessly made her heart ache, but it also made her long to sit down and play, to show what the piano could truly say. Her mind wandered to the countless hours she had spent practicing, alone in her room. She remembered the small victories, the moments when a melody finally felt right, the pride she had felt when her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys. She had never shared these moments with anyone. They had been hers alone. But now, faced with the piano in the room full of people, she felt a surge of possibility, a chance to reveal a part of herself she had always kept hidden. She imagined the room quieting, the guests turning their attention toward her, and the music filling the space. Her nerves made her heart pound, but she could almost feel the notes beneath her fingers, the flow of melody that had always come so naturally when she allowed herself to be lost in it. For a moment, she closed her eyes, picturing herself playing, imagining the beauty of the music spreading across the room, touching the hearts of those who listened. A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. One of the hosts approached her with a warm smile, noticing her quiet presence in the corner. "Would you like to play a piece for everyone?" they asked, their tone kind and encouraging. The question made her freeze, her mind spinning with fear and doubt. She had never performed in public before. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed or judged her? The very thought made her stomach tighten. Yet, there was something in the host's eyes that reassured her, a quiet faith that she could do it. They didn't push or demand. They simply offered a gentle invitation. The young woman bit her lip, her fingers trembling slightly as she considered the offer. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, excitement, doubt, hope. It was a battle between her desire to remain hidden and her longing to share the music that lived inside her. She glanced around the room, noticing the warm, friendly faces of the guests. Some were smiling, some chatting, some unaware of her presence. She realized that most people were kind, more curious than critical. Perhaps she thought this was not a stage for judgment but a space for connection. Her fingers twitched, itching to touch the keys, to let the music flow and speak what she could not. Finally, she nodded softly, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it was enough. The host's smile widened, and they gently guided her toward the piano. Each step felt heavy and light at the same time, her heart racing but her mind slowly finding clarity. She sat down on the piano bench, her hands hovering above the keys, feeling the cool wood beneath her fingers. The room seemed to hush slightly, as if sensing that something delicate and important was about to unfold. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and allowed herself to sink into the music. The first notes came slowly, softly, almost timidly, like a whisper. But with each passing moment, the notes grew stronger, more confident, more filled with emotion. The music began to tell a story, one of quiet longing, hidden dreams, and the beauty of the unseen. She let go of her fear, letting the melody carry her, letting the piano speak for her. Around the room, people began to notice. Conversations faded into silence, and eyes turned toward the piano. Some guests leaned forward, intrigued, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The young woman did not look up. She was lost in the music, lost in the world she had always known so intimately. The room seemed to shrink around her, leaving only her and the piano, connected in a way that words could never explain. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, each note resonating with emotion. She could feel the power of the music, the way it could touch hearts and bring people together. Her shyness melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose. The piano had always been her voice, and now, for the first time, she was using it to reach out to others, to share a piece of herself that had always been hidden. As the music filled the room, she noticed small reactions from the guests. A smile here, a hand covering a mouth in surprise there, a few teary eyes glancing toward her. She realized that her playing was not just her own experience. It was touching the people around her, connecting her to them in a way she had never imagined. The shy girl who had entered the room in fear was becoming someone entirely different, someone brave enough to share her soul through music. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and delicate, fading slowly into silence. She sat back, her hands resting on the keys, and opened her eyes. The room remained quiet for a brief moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, savoring what had just happened. Then, the soft murmur of awe and appreciation began to spread, small claps that grew into warm, heartfelt applause. The young woman felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her music, her heart, with others, and they had received it with admiration and respect. For the first time, she realized that being shy did not mean being invisible, and that sometimes the most extraordinary moments could come from the quietest people. As the applause continued, she allowed herself a small, shy smile. She had taken a step out of her comfort zone and discovered something incredible about herself. The piano, her lifelong companion, had helped her find her voice, even in a world full of people. And in that quiet, shining moment, she understood that she could do more than she had ever imagined, that her music could touch hearts, and that her shyness was not a barrier, but a part of the journey that had led her here. The young woman had never imagined herself in a position like this, sitting at the piano in the middle of a room filled with people she barely knew. Her fingers hovered above the keys, her mind a swirl of nervous energy and anticipation. She could feel the warmth of the audience's eyes on her, not in a judgmental way, but with curiosity and expectation. Every little movement she made seemed amplified. Every breath she took felt loud in the quiet room. She had to decide what to do, whether to retreat into the safety of her corner or step forward and share the music that had lived inside her for so long. The host, noticing her hesitation, leaned closer with a gentle smile. "Take your time. they said softly. Just play what feels right. Everyone will enjoy it. The words, simple and kind, seemed to ease some of her tension. She nodded, trying to remember the countless hours she had spent practicing, the melodies that had become part of her life. Music had always been her safe place, and now it could be her way to connect with others, to share something real and beautiful. Guests continued to chat softly, some glancing at the piano, sensing that something important was about to happen. She noticed a few familiar faces, people who had always been encouraging or kind to others, and she drew strength from their presence. Her fingers began to move slowly, touching the keys with careful precision. The first notes were gentle, hesitant, almost like testing the waters. She played softly, letting the music speak before her voice or her nerves could interfere. As she continued, the melody grew more confident. She remembered a piece she had loved for years, a composition that captured the feelings she had never been able to say aloud. The music flowed, delicate and expressive, filling the room in ways that words never could. Guests began to notice the difference in her playing. Conversations quieted, and people leaned forward slightly, drawn by the beauty and sincerity of the performance. Some faces reflected surprise, others admiration, and a few even held a hint of disbelief that someone so quiet and shy could produce something so moving. The young woman felt a strange mix of fear and joy. Fear that she might make a mistake and ruin the moment, but joy that she was finally expressing herself in a way that others could truly understand. Each note became a message, a piece of her story carried through the piano. She allowed herself to lose focus on the audience, to forget her shyness, and simply let her fingers and the music guide her. The anxiety that had seemed so heavy earlier began to melt, replaced by a sense of purpose and presence that she had rarely felt before. Some guests whispered to one another, trying not to disturb the music. "Did you know she could play like that?" one asked quietly. "I had no idea," another replied, eyes wide in admiration. Their surprise was genuine, but it was not mockery or judgment. They had come to hear music, and they were receiving something far beyond their expectations. The young woman could not see every reaction, but she could feel the energy of the room shifting, a quiet respect settling over the audience as they began to connect with her performance. She paused briefly, taking a deep breath before continuing with another section of the piece. Her fingers moved faster now, more confidently, as she navigated through the melody she had practiced countless times. The music had a life of its own, sometimes gentle, sometimes powerful, and it seemed to ripple through the room like a current, touching everyone in subtle, emotional ways. She could sense that people were moved, though she did not allow herself to look up too often. The focus remained on the music, as if it were the only language that mattered in that moment. Her mind drifted back to the quiet evenings she had spent alone with her piano, the notes echoing through her empty room, her heart speaking to her fingers. She remembered the frustration when a piece would not come together, the elation when she finally mastered it, the tears she had sometimes shed in private when the music moved her too deeply to contain. And now, in this room full of strangers, that same music had the power to move others, to create a shared experience that transcended words. The thought gave her a surge of confidence, a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. A few people had moved closer, subtly, as if trying to catch every detail of her playing. One older woman held her hands together in admiration, a soft smile on her face, and a man nearby nodded slowly, clearly impressed. The young woman began to realize that this was not just about her playing. It was about connecting, about creating a moment that was larger than herself. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a bridge between her quiet world and the lives of those around her. The music began to build toward a climax, a part of the composition that required both skill and emotion. She felt her heart racing, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. The notes demanded precision, yet also freedom, and she let herself move with them, allowing her fingers to respond naturally, almost instinctively. The room seemed to hold its breath, every guest captivated by the unfolding melody. The energy was palpable, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and deep appreciation that she had never imagined she could inspire. In that moment, the young woman felt a sense of triumph that had nothing to do with applause or recognition. It was personal, intimate, a quiet realization that she had stepped out of her comfort zone and embraced something deeply meaningful. She understood, perhaps for the first time, that her shyness was not a limitation but a part of her uniqueness, a quality that made her perspective and expression all the more powerful. The music allowed her to communicate what words could not, to reveal herself in a way that was authentic and unforgettable. As she played the final notes, a gentle hush fell over the room. The sound lingered, delicate and fading, leaving a sense of stillness that seemed almost sacred. The young woman sat back for a moment, her hands resting on the keys, feeling the resonance of the piano vibrating through her body. She opened her eyes slowly, noticing the faces of the guests, some wide-eyed, some smiling, all clearly affected by what they had just witnessed. The room had shifted in ways that she could feel, though she could not yet fully comprehend. The host approached again, a look of quiet pride and encouragement in their eyes. "That was incredible," they said softly. "You have such a gift." The words, simple yet heartfelt, brought a warmth to her chest that she had rarely experienced. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with respect and admiration. The shy guest who had arrived earlier, unsure and hesitant, was no longer invisible. She had left a mark on everyone in the room, a memory that would linger long after the event had ended. Small claps began to rise, almost timidly at first, then growing steadily as the audience recognized the beauty of her performance. The young woman allowed herself a small smile, a mixture of relief and quiet joy. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and discovered that sharing her music was not as terrifying as she had imagined. It was transformative, a moment of connection and revelation that transcended her own self-doubt. As the applause continued, she realized that this experience would stay with her, a turning point in her life. The shy guest who had once feared attention had discovered the power of her own voice, expressed not through words but through the language of music. She felt a sense of possibility, a quiet confidence that perhaps this was only the beginning of a new chapter. The piano, her lifelong companion, had given her more than just notes and melodies. It had given her courage, connection, and the knowledge that even the quietest hearts can make a profound impact. The room slowly returned to its gentle murmur of conversation, but the energy had changed. Guests continued to smile and exchange remarks about the performance, their admiration and surprise evident in their eyes. The young woman remained seated for a moment, letting the music and the reactions settle in her heart. She understood, in a way she had never before, that the true beauty of her gift was not in perfection, but in the honesty and emotion she brought to it. The shy girl who had hesitated at the edge of the room had stepped into the light, and in doing so, had created a moment that would be remembered by all who had witnessed it. The young woman's fingers moved over the keys with a newfound confidence, each note carrying emotion and depth. The initial hesitation that had clouded her mind was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection to the music. The room, which had moments ago been filled with soft conversation and shifting movements, now seemed to fade away entirely. Only the piano, the melody, and the silent attention of the audience mattered. Every sound she made seemed to resonate not just in the room, but inside her, a reflection of her courage and her long-hidden passion. The guests sat quietly, captivated by the unfolding performance. Some had leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the grace and precision of her playing. Others had stopped their small talk altogether, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. A few people whispered softly to one another, trying to express the surprise they felt at the depth of talent emanating from someone so unassuming. Her shyness, once thought to limit her presence, now seemed to enhance the impact of every note she played, making it feel genuine and unpolished in the most beautiful way. Her mind was calm, focused entirely on the piano. She had spent years learning to communicate through music, and now the time had come to let it speak freely. Each chord, each trill, each gentle touch of the keys carried not just sound, but emotion, a story of quiet longing, patience, and unspoken dreams. She felt the music moving through her, a current guiding her fingers with precision and fluidity. In that moment, the shy girl in the corner had disappeared, replaced by a musician completely absorbed in her craft. Some of the guests glanced at one another, exchanging looks of awe. A man seated near the back murmured quietly, "I didn't know someone so quiet could play like that." The woman next to him nodded, eyes wide with admiration. Another guest, holding a small child on her lap, smiled as the child's tiny fingers tapped along instinctively to the rhythm. Even in this informal setting, the performance felt sacred, a shared experience connecting everyone present through the universal language of music. The young woman began to play a section that required more intensity, a part of the piece where emotion and technical skill intertwined. Her fingers danced across the keys, swift and deliberate, yet full of grace. The melody rose and fell, carrying with it moments of tension and release. She felt herself lifting into the music, almost as if she were flying with every note. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of her performance, the audience drawn in by the expressive waves that flowed from the piano. She caught glimpses of the guests' faces in the corners of her vision. Some had their hands clasped together, their eyes reflecting amazement. Others had leaned closer, trying to catch every subtle detail of her playing. One older man, who had been speaking quietly to a friend at the beginning, had gone completely silent, his gaze fixed on her hands and the piano. She felt a quiet thrill knowing that she was holding their attention, moving their hearts with something that had always been a part of her inner world but rarely shared. As she continued, the melody shifted, softening into gentle, flowing passages that required delicacy and emotion. She allowed herself to linger on each note, letting it breathe and resonate. The music became a conversation, an intimate dialogue between her and the piano, and, through it, with the audience. She noticed subtle reactions, the catch of a breath, the tilt of a head, a small smile of recognition, as if the room itself were listening in rapt attention, absorbed by the nuances of her performance. Her confidence grew with every measure. She remembered the countless nights spent alone, practicing pieces until they were perfect, feeling the satisfaction of each small accomplishment. Those private moments, once hidden from the world, now transformed into a public gift. She realized that her shyness had not hindered her talent. It had given her time to cultivate it, to make it deeply personal and meaningful. And now, as she played, she was sharing that personal world with everyone in the room, creating a connection that transcended words. Some guests, who had come with casual expectations, were clearly surprised by the depth of her performance. Whispers of admiration began to spread quietly through the room. "She's amazing," one person said softly. "I never would have guessed," another replied. The young woman remained unaware of these words, too absorbed in the music to be distracted by her audience. Yet, the subtle energy of the room, the collective attention and engagement, lifted her spirits and propelled her forward, encouraging her to express even more freely. The piece began to build toward its climax, demanding both technical skill and emotional intensity. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, letting it guide her fingers with precision and passion. The room seemed to respond instinctively, the audience leaning forward in anticipation, their focus unwavering. The piano's resonance filled every corner of the space, the notes echoing and lingering in a way that made the air feel alive. She could feel the power of the moment, the profound effect that music could have when performed with honesty and heart. Her playing became more expressive, weaving in subtle shifts in tempo, dynamics, and emotion. Each chord she struck seemed to convey a different aspect of her story: fear, longing, hope, and courage, all blending together into a seamless, moving narrative. The shy girl who had arrived uncertain and hesitant was no longer present. Only the musician, fully immersed in her craft, remained. The audience could sense it, feeling the authenticity and vulnerability of every note she played. As the music soared to its emotional peak, the young woman noticed small gestures from the guests. A hand over the mouth, a slight widening of the eyes, a deep, reflective inhale. They were not just listening. They were experiencing the music, letting it reach into their hearts and stir emotions they may not have expected to feel. She realized that her playing had the power to touch people, to create a shared moment of beauty and connection. This realization filled her with a quiet sense of triumph and gratitude, a recognition of her own courage in stepping into this space. The final section of the piece approached, softening again, returning to the gentle, delicate melodies that had opened the performance. Her fingers moved with care, savoring each note, letting the music linger and breathe. The room remained silent, the audience completely absorbed, as if they did not want to interrupt the fragile beauty of the moment. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only played the music but shared a piece of herself, her emotions, and her story with everyone present. When the last note faded into silence, the young woman exhaled slowly, her hands resting on the keys. The room stayed quiet for a heartbeat, the stillness almost sacred. Then, softly at first, the applause began to rise. One by one, people clapped, their admiration and appreciation filling the space. The young woman allowed herself a small, humble smile, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, embraced her talent, and discovered the profound impact of sharing her music with others. The audience's reactions continued to ripple through the room. Some whispered to one another, expressing their surprise and admiration. Others nodded quietly, their eyes reflecting genuine respect. The young woman, though shy, felt a quiet warmth as she realized that her performance had left an impression, that her music had touched hearts in ways she could not have imagined. In that moment, she understood that courage and talent, when combined, could create experiences that lingered long after the music had ended. As she sat there, breathing in the applause and the quiet energy of the room, she reflected on the journey that had led her to this moment. From the long hours spent alone with her piano to the doubts and fears that had often held her back, every experience had prepared her for this. She had learned that her shyness was not a limitation but a part of her character, and that by embracing it rather than hiding, she could create moments of unexpected beauty and connection. The young woman's eyes scanned the room, catching the approving glances of the host and the smiles of the guests. She realized that this performance was more than a simple act of playing the piano. It was a revelation, a demonstration of courage and authenticity. She had shared a piece of herself in a way that words could not capture, and the impact was evident in the expressions and reactions of those around her. As the applause began to subside, she remained seated, savoring the lingering warmth and quiet reverence in the room. Her mind was calm, her heart full, and a sense of accomplishment settled over her. She had faced her fears, expressed her inner world, and created a moment of beauty and connection that would be remembered. The shy guest who had entered the room uncertain and hesitant had become someone capable of moving others through her art, leaving a mark that extended far beyond the notes she had played. The young woman felt a surge of energy as she moved into the most challenging and emotional part of the piece. Her fingers flew over the keys with a combination of precision and passion that made each note resonate deeply. She was completely absorbed, her body leaning slightly forward, her eyes closed as she let the music take over. The melody carried intensity, building with every chord, every arpeggio, until it filled the entire room, reaching the ears and hearts of everyone present. Guests could feel the shift immediately. The casual atmosphere of the room had disappeared, replaced by a silent, almost reverent focus. People sat with their backs straight, leaning in, eyes fixed on the piano as if they could see the music itself in the young woman's movements. Some had their hands clasped in front of them, fingers tapping lightly in rhythm, while others held their hands over their mouths, unable to contain the emotion that the music was evoking. It was a shared experience, intimate and profound, and it bound everyone in the room together without a single word spoken. Her mind was clear, yet fully alive with emotion. She had spent years nurturing her talent, and now it was no longer just a personal skill but a vehicle for connection. The music she had played in quiet solitude for so long was finally being shared, and the impact was more powerful than she could have imagined. Each note carried her feelings, her hopes, her fears, and her joy. The piano became an extension of herself, a mirror reflecting the depth of her soul. The melody rose and fell, moving between gentle, delicate passages and intense, dramatic moments. Her hands flew across the keys, precise and fluid, yet every movement was infused with raw emotion. She allowed herself to express fully, to let the music tell the story she had carried inside for so long. There was no hesitation, no self-consciousness. She was no longer the shy girl who had entered the room but a musician completely immersed in her art. Some guests were visibly moved, their expressions a mixture of awe and admiration. A few had tears forming in their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and emotion of the performance. Others leaned closer to hear the nuances, whispering softly to themselves in amazement. The energy in the room had transformed, from casual social gathering to a shared, almost sacred experience. The young woman could feel it too, the intensity and focus of the audience heightening the connection she felt through the music. She reached the crescendo of the piece, where technical skill and emotional depth converged. Her fingers flew over the keys with confidence, and the music seemed to pulse through the room like a living thing. The notes soared, dipped, and swirled, filling every corner of the space with a richness and intensity that made the guests hold their breath. The shy guest had become the center of attention not through words or presence but through the power of her performance. The room seemed to vibrate with the resonance of the piano. Each chord struck with deliberate force, yet with such emotion that it felt as if the notes carried her feelings directly into the hearts of the listeners. The young woman could feel the connection, sensing the way her music was touching everyone, moving them in ways she had never imagined. For her, it was a revelation. Her art could create a moment that transcended personality, that reached straight to the emotions of those who experienced it. The climax passed, giving way to slower, softer passages that demanded delicate control. She let each note linger, allowing it to breathe and resonate. The intensity shifted to reflection, and the music became intimate, a quiet conversation between herself and the piano. The audience remained rapt, sensing the vulnerability and beauty in every subtle movement. It was a performance that could not be measured by skill alone, but by the honesty and emotion it conveyed. Some guests exchanged glances, whispering softly, trying to express their astonishment. "I can't believe she's capable of this," one said quietly. "It's breathtaking," another replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The young woman, lost in the music, remained unaware of the commentary, yet she could feel the impact of her performance through the energy and focus of the audience. It was a moment of pure connection, the kind that artists dream of but rarely experience. The music shifted once again, a gentle and reflective ending that required both precision and sensitivity. Her hands moved gracefully over the keys, slowing the tempo, softening the chords, letting the melody taper naturally. Each note was carefully placed, each pause measured with care. She felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that she had expressed the emotions she had carried within her, that the music had conveyed her story without needing words. It was a triumph of self-expression, a moment where her shy personality and her extraordinary talent merged into something unforgettable. The room remained silent for a heartbeat after the final note faded. The young woman let her hands rest on the piano, feeling the vibrations settle in her chest. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from the exhilaration and emotional release of having shared herself through music. Then, slowly, a soft ripple of applause began to rise. One guest clapped, then another, until the sound spread through the room, warm and heartfelt. People were not just clapping for technical skill, but for the courage, the authenticity, and the emotion that had been poured into the performance. Tears had formed in some eyes, and smiles spread across faces in the audience. The young woman allowed herself to open her eyes and look around. She saw genuine admiration, wonder, and awe reflected in the expressions of those who had been fortunate enough to witness her performance. In that moment, she understood the power of music, its ability to connect people across differences, to express emotions that words could never fully capture. She had shared a piece of her soul, and it had been received with gratitude and respect. The host approached again, a soft smile on their face. "That was truly incredible," they said. "You have touched everyone here tonight." The young woman nodded, her chest warm with pride and relief. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and discovered that her quiet personality did not limit her ability to connect with others. In fact, it had made the moment even more striking. The contrast between her reserved demeanor and the depth of her performance creating a sense of surprise and admiration. As the applause continued, some guests rose to their feet, clapping more enthusiastically, while others wiped away tears or exchanged quiet words of astonishment. The young woman sat back, allowing the warmth and appreciation to wash over her. She had not only performed a beautiful piece of music, but had also shown herself the power of courage and vulnerability. Her shyness had not been a weakness. It had been the backdrop against which her talent shone even brighter. The energy in the room was almost tangible, a mixture of amazement, inspiration, and connection. Guests spoke softly to one another, reflecting on the performance and the unexpected talent of someone they had barely noticed before. The young woman's heart swelled with a quiet joy, knowing that her music had created an unforgettable experience. For the first time, she realized that sharing her talent could be a source of pride and fulfillment, not just anxiety. She allowed herself a small smile, still seated at the piano, savoring the moment. The performance had been more than she could have imagined. It had been a journey, a revelation, a triumph of courage and artistry. The shy girl who had entered the room uncertain and hesitant had transformed into someone capable of leaving a lasting impression through her talent. In that moment, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey where her music could touch hearts, inspire others, and reveal the quiet but profound power of her inner world. The audience slowly began to settle back into normal conversation, yet the energy had shifted permanently. Guests exchanged remarks about the performance, still clearly moved and inspired. The young woman remained at the piano for a moment longer, letting the experience sink in, feeling a sense of accomplishment and connection that was deeply personal. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, embraced her talent, and created a moment that would stay with everyone who witnessed it. The shy guest had revealed a surprising depth of courage and artistry, leaving everyone in the room truly stunned. The young woman slowly lifted her hands from the piano keys, feeling the echoes of the last notes lingering in the air. The applause had been steady and warm, but she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, savoring the experience she had just shared. She had taken a step that once seemed impossible, and now she could feel the weight of that choice, the significance of having shared her music so openly. Her shyness had not disappeared, but it felt lighter, more manageable, replaced by a quiet sense of pride and fulfillment. The guests began to approach, one by one, offering words of admiration and encouragement. Some spoke softly, others more animatedly, but all conveyed a sense of genuine appreciation. A few who had known her only as a quiet presence expressed surprise at the depth of her talent. "I never imagined you could play like that," one whispered, eyes wide. Another smiled, tears glistening in her eyes, saying, "That was truly beautiful. Thank you for sharing this with us." Each comment, each word of praise, seemed to warm her from the inside, giving her a sense of connection she had rarely experienced. She listened quietly, nodding and offering small smiles in return. The words were comforting, but more than that, they were validating. For years, she had practiced alone, uncertain if her music would ever have meaning beyond her own room. Tonight, she had discovered that her quiet, reserved nature did not prevent her from touching the hearts of others. If anything, it had made her talent all the more surprising and impactful. Her music had reached out and connected, bridging the gap between her private world and the lives of those around her. The host approached once more, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift," they said sincerely. "You've given everyone here a memory they will not forget." She nodded, a small smile on her lips, her chest warm with a mixture of gratitude and humility. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, a reminder that courage and authenticity could transform even the most ordinary experiences into something extraordinary. A few guests lingered nearby, hoping to speak more with her. They asked questions about her music, about how long she had been playing, and what inspired her compositions. She answered softly, her voice still gentle but confident, revealing bits of herself she had previously kept private. The interactions were new and somewhat unfamiliar, but she found comfort in the curiosity and warmth of the people around her. It was not overwhelming, as she had feared, but energizing, reinforcing her sense of accomplishment. As the evening continued, she noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Conversations no longer carried the casual chatter of a typical gathering. Instead, people discussed the performance, their words filled with admiration, surprise, and inspiration. Some guests even speculated about the young woman's potential, imagining the places her talent could take her if she chose to embrace it more openly. The shy guest who had once faded into the background had become the center of admiration, her quiet presence now a source of wonder and inspiration. She wandered through the room, still absorbing the energy around her. Some guests approached simply to offer a smile or nod of approval, while others shared stories of how the music had affected them personally. A woman recounted memories from her own childhood, how certain melodies had always reminded her of her family, and how tonight's performance had stirred similar emotions. The young woman listened with a gentle, understanding smile, realizing that music had the power to transcend individual experiences, to touch people in ways that words alone could not. As the evening began to wind down, she returned to the piano, sitting quietly and letting her hands rest on the keys. The polished surface reflected the soft light, and she could almost feel the memories of the night lingering within the instrument itself. She thought about how far she had come, from the hesitant, shy person who had entered the room to the confident musician who had captured the attention of everyone present. It was a transformation that felt both surreal and deeply satisfying. She reflected on her journey with music, the countless hours of practice, the moments of frustration and triumph, and the quiet nights spent exploring melodies in solitude. All of those experiences had led to this moment, a convergence of preparation, courage, and opportunity. For the first time, she realized that her shyness had never been a limitation. It had shaped her perspective, deepened her emotional understanding, and given her music a unique depth that could not have been achieved otherwise. Her quiet nature had allowed her to listen, observe, and internalize the world, and now she had shared that perspective in a way that resonated with everyone. The host approached again, gently suggesting that she might consider playing more often in the future, perhaps at other gatherings or even in public performances. She nodded thoughtfully, the idea both exciting and intimidating. The thought of performing again brought a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, but she also felt a spark of possibility, a sense that her talent could open doors she had never dared to consider. The evening had revealed to her the joy and fulfillment that came from sharing her gift, and she could sense that this was only the beginning. As the last guests began to leave, she stood near the piano, exchanging quiet farewells and receiving final words of appreciation. Each interaction reinforced the sense of accomplishment she felt, and she allowed herself to savor the warmth and connection that had been created. Her music had been a bridge, transforming her from a quiet observer into a source of inspiration, and the experience had forever changed how she viewed herself and her abilities. Once the room was nearly empty, she sat alone at the piano for a few moments, fingers lightly touching the keys. The silence was comforting, a gentle reminder of the private moments that had prepared her for this night. She allowed herself to play a few soft, lingering notes, not for an audience, but for herself. Each sound echoed in the room, carrying with it the emotions of the evening, the courage she had discovered, and the joy of sharing her music. It was a quiet reflection, a moment of closure and self-recognition, and it left her feeling deeply satisfied and at peace. She rose from the piano, taking one last look around the room, now empty and still. The night had been transformative, revealing to her the unexpected power of vulnerability, the beauty of courage, and the joy of connecting with others through art. She understood that her shyness did not define her limits. It had simply been one part of a larger journey towards self-expression and confidence. The shy guest had become a musician whose music could move people, touch hearts, and inspire others to appreciate the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. As she left the room, the young woman carried with her a sense of accomplishment and possibility. She felt lighter, braver, and more confident in her abilities. The experience had shown her that stepping forward, even in fear, could lead to moments of beauty and connection that lingered far beyond the immediate performance. Her music had not only entertained, it had transformed, uplifted, and created a lasting memory for everyone who had witnessed it. Walking home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here and the opportunities that might lie ahead. She thought about how her music had spoken for her when words could not, and how her quiet, reserved nature had been an asset rather than a hindrance. She realized that this night was a turning point, a moment when she discovered the power of sharing her inner world with others. The shy guest, once hesitant and unsure, had emerged as a confident, expressive musician, ready to embrace the possibilities of the future. In the days that followed, she found herself thinking back to the performance often. The warm applause, the astonished faces, and the heartfelt comments from the guests remained vivid in her memory. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and a desire to continue developing her talent, to explore the full potential of her music, and to share it more openly with others. The experience had ignited a spark, a recognition that her music had the power to inspire, comfort, and connect, and that this was only the beginning of a journey she was now eager to pursue. The young woman understood that life was full of opportunities to step forward, to take risks, and to embrace moments of vulnerability. Her piano performance had been one such moment, and it had revealed not only her talent but also her inner strength. She carried with her the knowledge that she could face her fears, express herself authentically, and create experiences that left a lasting impression on others. The shy guest had become a symbol of courage and possibility, demonstrating that even the quietest voices could have a powerful impact when allowed to be heard.